She was body-shamed in front of the office. Then her husband walked in as the new CEO and fired all. Her colleagues' laughter echoed across the office as cruel words sliced through her heart. She tried to hold her head high, but their whispers about her body felt heavier than the files in her arms. Just as the humiliation reached its peak, the glass doors swung open, her husband stepped in, and with one powerful announcement, everything changed. What would you do if the person you loved most was torn down in front of everyone, and you suddenly had the power to turn the tables? Share your thoughts below before we dive in. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story that will touch your heart. The city of Chicago pulsed outside the windows of Redmond & Company, a mid-sized marketing firm nestled in a skyscraper of steel and glass. The hum of elevators, the shuffle of heels across marble floors, and the occasional ding of incoming emails created a rhythm that never seemed to stop. For many employees, the office was a place of ambition, networking, and climbing ladders. But for Kendra Johnson, it had become a battlefield. Kendra wasn't the kind of woman you could easily overlook. At 5'7" with rich, dark skin that glowed under fluorescent lights, she carried herself with a quiet dignity. Her curves filled the space she occupied, unapologetic and bold, though others never failed to remind her they thought she took up too much. She had earned her place here, graduating near the top of her class, outworking most of her colleagues, and bringing in measurable results on campaigns. But still, what lingered in people's minds wasn't her sharp mind or strategic creativity. It was her body. And in this office, that had become her curse. She balanced a stack of thick reports in her arms, her heels clicking softly against the carpet as she walked down the aisle of cubicles. She could feel it before she heard it, the shift in the air, the way conversations hushed as she passed, only to swell again in her wake with laughter that wasn't meant to be kind. "Careful, Kendra," a voice floated from behind. "Don't let the floor collapse." The words were delivered with a chuckle, casual cruelty wrapped in false humor. A few more laughs joined in, bouncing across the sterile gray dividers. Kendra's jaw tightened, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. From another corner, someone whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Did you see her this morning? That skirt is hanging on for dear life." The laughter grew. Kendra shifted her grip on the reports, pressing them tighter against her chest. Each cruel word was a pinprick, and though she trained herself to keep walking, the wounds added up. She caught a glimpse of herself in the reflection of a computer screen, her blouse neatly tucked, her curls pinned back in a low bun, her makeup subtle but elegant. She looked professional, capable. Yet all they saw was the body she lived in, a body they treated like a punchline. At the far end of the aisle, Linda Marshall, head of HR, leaned against a cubicle wall with a manicured hand on her hip. Tall, thin, blonde, Linda was the office's self-appointed queen. She smirked as Kendra walked past, leaning in to whisper to the man beside her. Kendra didn't catch the full sentence, but one word carried across the space like a blade. "Whale." Her throat tightened. She forced her eyes forward, refusing to give Linda the satisfaction of seeing her reaction. The glass door of the conference room loomed ahead, and Kendra pushed it open with her shoulder, grateful for the brief sanctuary. The door shut behind her, muting the noise, muting the laughter, but not the sting. She lowered the reports onto the table with trembling hands. The polished surface reflected her face back at her, wide, warm brown eyes, lips pressed into a thin line, and exhaustion etched into her expression. She looked tired. Tired of fighting battles no one else seemed to see. She sank into one of the leather chairs, resting her elbows on the table. The hum of the air conditioning filled the silence. For a moment, she closed her eyes, willing herself to breathe. This wasn't new. The comments, the laughter, the endless little humiliations. They'd started small, just jokes, brushed off as harmless fun. But they'd grown sharper, meaner, as if people had decided she was fair game. It was as though her competence, her ideas, her late nights and sacrifices meant nothing compared to the size of her waistline. And the cruelest part? Kendra knew she was good at her job. She had spearheaded campaigns that brought in six-figure contracts. She had mentored interns who now flourished in their careers. She had pitched ideas that transformed client strategies. But none of that shielded her from whispers about whether she should really be eating that bagel at the morning meeting. She ran her hand across the smooth surface of the table, grounding herself. At home, things were different. At home, she was seen. She was loved. Her husband, Ethan Carter, never let her forget her worth. Ethan wasn't flashy, though he could have been. His sandy brown hair, sharp jawline, and tall frame turned heads when they went out, but what had drawn her to him wasn't his looks. It was the way he listened. The way he laughed at her jokes, respected her dreams, and reminded her daily that she was enough. He worked in corporate leadership, quietly, diligently, and with a strength that few understood. Kendra rarely talked about him at work, partly because she valued their privacy, and partly because she didn't want to hand her colleagues another angle for gossip. In this office, she was just Kendra Johnson, marketing associate. That was enough. Or at least, it was supposed to be. She adjusted the reports, lining them up neatly. The quarterly presentation was in less than an hour, and her boss, Richard, had demanded last-minute revisions. Richard was another problem altogether, mid-40s, balding, with a fondness for belittling his team in public. To him, Kendra was both a workhorse and a target, someone to dump tasks on and someone to make examples of when he needed to assert authority. The thought of presenting under his scrutinizing gaze tightened her stomach. The conference room door opened, and in walked two of her colleagues, Megan and Tyler. Both younger, both slimmer, both already climbing the ladder despite producing far less than Kendra did. They glanced at her, exchanged a look, then stifled laughs as they sat down. "Morning, Kendra," Megan said, her tone sweet but her smile mocking. Kendra returned a polite nod. "Morning." Tyler leaned back in his chair, scrolling through his phone. "Did you finish Richard's revisions?" he asked, not looking up. "They're right here," Kendra replied, tapping the stack of reports. "Good," he muttered, smirking faintly. "Wouldn't want you to, what's the phrase, drop the ball? Though you might crush it if you did." Megan snorted. Kendra's cheeks burned. She forced herself to keep her eyes on the reports. The rest of the team filtered in, the room filling with chatter. Kendra withdrew into herself, focusing on her breathing, rehearsing her talking points in her mind. If she could just get through this presentation, maybe the day would pass without another crack in her armor. But deep down, she knew today was different. The cruelty felt heavier, sharper, as though something was building. And she was right. Because before the day was over, everything in this office would change. If you were in Kendra's shoes, facing ridicule at work, would you confront it head-on or stay silent? Share your thoughts in the comments. The conference room gradually filled with the sound of chairs scraping against the floor, the chatter of coworkers, and the rustle of papers. The smell of fresh coffee wafted in from the cart that an intern had wheeled to the corner, mixing with a sterile scent of polished wood and printer ink. Kendra sat quietly at her end of the long mahogany table, her reports neatly stacked, her pen poised. She glanced around at her colleagues, their laughter easy, their confidence unshaken. They belonged here. At least, that's what they believed. She, on the other hand, often felt as though she were being tolerated rather than valued. The door swung open and Richard Stanton strode in, his tie slightly askew, a half-empty latte in hand. His presence demanded attention, not because he was particularly impressive, but because he thrived on intimidation. His eyes scanned the room, sharp and calculating, before they landed on Kendra. "Johnson," he barked, making her surname sound like an insult. "You've got the revisions?" "Yes," she replied evenly, sliding the stack toward him. He picked them up, flipped through a few pages, and sighed loudly. "Figures. You've made it denser than a dictionary. Who's supposed to understand this? Not everyone has time to wade through all this." He tossed the reports back onto the table with a thud. A few chuckles rippled around the room. Kendra felt her pulse quicken, heat rising in her cheeks. I can summarize the key points during the presentation," she offered quietly. Richard smirked. "You'd better. Last thing we need is to put the clients to sleep. Or worse, confuse them. Heaven knows we can't afford to look incompetent." The word landed heavy. Incompetent. Kendra swallowed hard. She wasn't incompetent, far from it, but Richard knew how to twist the knife. The meeting began, slides projected onto the large screen. Colleagues took turns speaking, their voices confident, their gestures rehearsed. When Megan presented, Richard nodded approvingly, interrupting only to praise her phrasing. When Tyler spoke, Richard cracked a joke, earning laughter from the group. Then it was Kendra's turn. She stood, smoothing her blouse, her palms slick with sweat. She clicked to the next slide, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "For Q2, we've identified 3 primary opportunities for growth. Richard cut in with a dramatic sigh. Slow down, Kendra. Some of us actually want to stay awake. Laughter erupted around the table. Her throat constricted, but she pressed on. The first is a targeted campaign focusing on younger demographics. Our research shows. Hold up. Richard leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. Is this research your idea? Or did someone feed this to you? Kendra blinked. It was my initiative. I compiled the data from. He waved a dismissive hand. Well, I hope you double-checked it. You tend to miss things. More chuckles. The words stung worse than the laughter. She didn't miss things. She triple-checked everything. She stayed late while others went home, making sure every figure lined up, every graph made sense. Her chest tightened as she continued, her voice trembling despite her best effort to steady it. She clicked through slides, each interruption from Richard another blow. That's not clear. Try not to ramble. Can you make it less complicated? By the time she finished, her confidence was shredded. All right, Richard said, clapping his hands together as though brushing her off. Let's move on before we all die of boredom. The room erupted in laughter again. Kendra sank back into her chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry, not here, not in front of them. Linda leaned over from across the table, smirking. Don't take it personally, Kendra. Some people just aren't cut out for the big leagues. The words were honeyed poison. Kendra forced herself to stare at the screen, tuning out the murmurs, the jokes, the pitying looks. Inside, however, a storm raged. She thought of Ethan, how he always told her she was more than enough, how he encouraged her to stop hiding her brilliance. But here in this office, she felt small, diminished. As the meeting dragged on, Richard made an announcement that caused the room to buzz. Before we wrap up, there's something else. Corporate has been in talks about restructuring. Nothing's official yet, but let's just say we might be seeing some new leadership around here. He smirked. Who knows? Maybe someone who can actually whip this place into shape. The room filled with murmurs and speculation. Megan whispered to Tyler, excitement in her eyes. Linda grinned, already imagining herself in favor with whoever the new boss might be. Kendra, however, barely heard it. She was too busy holding herself together, too busy swallowing the ache in her throat. She didn't know it yet, but the new leadership Richard mocked so casually was already closer than anyone realized. And when the glass doors of Redmond and Company opened later that day, bringing in the man who would change everything, every cruel laugh and cutting word would be silenced. But for now, Kendra sat quietly in her chair, her heart bruised, her spirit weary, unaware that the tide was about to turn in her favor in a way no one in that office could have predicted. If you were in Kendra's place, what would you have done in that meeting? Fight back against Richard, or stay quiet to protect yourself? Let me know in the comments. The rest of the morning dragged on like a slow bleed. After the meeting, Kendra retreated to her cubicle, her head lowered, her reports stacked neatly on her desk. Around her, the office buzzed with renewed energy, people gossiping about Richard's announcement of new leadership, speculating on who the incoming executive might be. Probably some shark from New York, Tyler said loudly, leaning against Megan's desk. You know, someone who doesn't take prisoners. Can't wait to see who gets axed first. Maybe Kendra, Megan giggled. New CEOs always want to trim the fat. The words hit their mark. Kendra froze, her hands motionless on the keyboard. The laughter that followed was sharp, merciless. She forced herself not to react. She typed, she clicked, she scrolled, anything to look busy, to look invisible. But inside, her heart thudded painfully against her ribs. The cruelty wasn't even subtle anymore. Linda strolled past, her heels clicking on the floor. She stopped at Kendra's desk, smiling like a cat cornering a mouse. Don't take it personally, sweetie. Not everyone has the build for corporate life. Her eyes swept deliberately over Kendra's body before she walked away, laughing under her breath. Kendra gripped the arms of her chair until her knuckles whitened. At that moment, she wanted nothing more than to walk out of the office, to leave behind the insults and the whispers and never return. But she couldn't. She needed this job. She needed the paycheck, the stability. Ethan's career was thriving, yes, but Kendra refused to lean on him for everything. She had worked too hard to be independent, to build her own path. Still, her spirit was unraveling thread by thread. By lunchtime, she sat in the break room alone, picking half-heartedly at a salad she didn't even want. The sound of laughter drifted in from the hallway, familiar, cruel, and exhausting. She wanted to cry, but she swallowed it down. And then her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Kendra frowned at the message, confused. She started to type a reply, but her fingers hovered over the screen. Ethan was never cryptic. But there was something in those words, something firm, something purposeful, that made her pause. Before she could dwell on it, the office intercom crackled. Richard's voice echoed across the building. "Attention, everyone. Please gather in the lobby. Our new CEO has arrived." The break room filled with murmurs as employees rushed to grab their things, eager to catch the first glimpse of the mysterious leader who would shape the company's future. Kendra lingered for a moment, her pulse quickening. She smoothed her blouse, dabbed at the corner of her eyes, and forced herself to stand. The lobby was already packed when she arrived. Glass walls reflected the anxious, excited faces of her colleagues. Megan and Tyler whispered animatedly. Linda adjusted her blazer, smoothing her hair with quick, nervous hands. Richard stood near the front, a self-satisfied smirk plastered on his face, as though he were personally responsible for the new CEO's arrival. Then the glass doors opened, and the room fell silent. A tall man in a tailored navy suit strode in, his presence commanding the space instantly. His sandy brown hair was neatly styled, his blue-gray eyes sharp and focused. His posture radiated quiet authority, the kind that didn't need to shout to be respected. Kendra's breath caught in her throat. Her husband. He scanned the room slowly, his gaze cool and assessing. The whispers began almost immediately. "Who is he? Wow, he looks powerful. He's definitely not from around here." Richard stepped forward eagerly, hand extended. "Welcome to Redmond and Company, sir. We're thrilled to." Ethan brushed past him without shaking his hand. His eyes swept the crowd once more, and then, finally, they landed on Kendra. In that instant, everything around her blurred. For weeks, months, maybe even years, she had endured this place alone. She had carried the weight of every cruel word, every whispered insult, every smirk that cut her down. And now, standing before her, was the one person who had always seen her, always loved her. Ethan's expression softened as their eyes met, just for a moment. Then he straightened, his voice calm but firm as he addressed the room. "My name is Ethan Carter," he said. "As of this morning, I am the new CEO of Redmond and Company." The room erupted with murmurs. Shock, curiosity, excitement. Kendra felt her coworkers' eyes dart toward her, confused. She sat frozen, her heart pounding. Ethan continued, his tone steady. "This company has potential. But I've already been made aware of certain toxic behaviors. That ends today. Redmond and Company will be a place of excellence, but also a place of respect." His words hung in the air like a hammer waiting to fall. Linda shifted uncomfortably. Richard frowned. Megan and Tyler exchanged nervous glances. Ethan took a step forward, his gaze sweeping across the room again. "Some of you may find the changes uncomfortable. Some of you may not belong here at all." The silence was deafening. Then, to everyone's astonishment, Ethan walked directly toward Kendra. He stopped in front of her, his voice lowering, not for secrecy, but for intimacy. "Kendra," he said softly, with a warmth that only she would recognize, "come stand with me." Gasps rippled through the room. Kendra rose slowly, her hands trembling. As she walked to his side, she could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her. Ethan placed a reassuring hand at the small of her back. His voice rose again, firm and unyielding. "For those of you who don't already know," he said, his gaze sweeping across the stunned faces, "this extraordinary woman is my wife." The room froze. Megan's jaw dropped. Tyler's smirk evaporated. Linda's eyes widened, color draining from her face. Richard looked as though the floor had been ripped out from beneath him. Ethan's expression hardened. "And anyone who has disrespected her, has disrespected me." The silence that followed was suffocating. Kendra's heart pounded in her chest. For the first time in years, she felt the power shift, not away from her, but in her favor. And though Ethan hadn't spoken the words yet, Everyone in that room knew retribution was coming. If you were Ethan, walking in as the new CEO and seeing how your wife had been treated, what would you do first? Fire them all immediately, or make them squirm? Let me know in the comments. The lobby was so silent you could hear the faint hum of the elevators. Kendra stood beside Ethan, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. Only moments ago, she had been invisible, an easy target for every cruel joke and snide remark. Now, the entire office was staring at her, stunned into silence. Her heart raced. She wanted to shrink, to disappear under the weight of so many eyes. And yet, for the first time in months, she didn't feel small. She felt protected, seen. Ethan's hand rested lightly at her back, grounding her. His presence radiated quiet power, and she could feel it seeping into her bones, reminding her that she didn't have to fight alone anymore. Richard was the first to break the silence. His laugh was forced, brittle. Well, what a surprise. Mrs. Carter, Johnson, Kendra. You never told us you were married to. His words trailed off as he gestured weakly at Ethan, as though the reality of what had just unfolded was too heavy to articulate. Ethan's eyes cut to him, cold and sharp. That's because she didn't need to. Her work should speak for itself. Or is this the kind of company where you judge people on anything but their work? Richard swallowed hard, his smirk fading. Megan and Tyler exchanged a panicked glance. Megan's usual confidence melted into wide-eyed panic, while Tyler's jaw worked nervously as though chewing on a lie he wasn't sure would hold. Linda, ever the actress, plastered on her brightest smile. She stepped forward, her tone syrupy sweet. Oh, Kendra, you should have told us. We would have celebrated. My goodness, how exciting to know our colleague is married to someone so important. Kendra's stomach turned at the falseness dripping from Linda's words. For weeks, Linda had been her tormentor, snide comments, whispered insults, cutting jokes delivered with a smile. Now suddenly, Linda's voice was soft, deferential. Ethan saw through it instantly. His lips curved into a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. I don't recall asking for anyone's performance as a friend, he said evenly. But I'll certainly be reviewing everyone's performance as an employee. The words landed like a slap. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, a ripple of unease moving through them. Kendra glanced up at Ethan, her chest swelling with a mix of pride and disbelief. This man, her husband, wasn't just protecting her. He was reclaiming her dignity in front of every single person who had tried to strip it away. And yet, she felt a flicker of fear. The office was watching her not as a victim now, but as the wife of their new CEO. Would they resent her more? Would they whisper behind her back even louder? Ethan seemed to sense her unease. He leaned closer, his voice low enough for only her to hear. Breathe. You don't have to do anything. I'll handle this. Her eyes welled, but she blinked the tears back. For the first time all day, she let herself believe it, he would handle this. Ethan turned back to the room. I want to make one thing clear, he said, his voice firm but calm. From this moment forward, Redmond and Company will be a place of respect. I will not tolerate gossip, I will not tolerate cruelty, and I will not tolerate incompetence disguised as leadership. His eyes flicked briefly to Richard. The message was unmistakable. Richard's face flushed, his jaw tightening. He opened his mouth to speak, but Ethan raised a hand. Save it. I'll be scheduling one-on-ones with each department head. That will tell me all I need to know. Megan raised her hand tentatively, her voice trembling. Mr. Carter, Ethan, I just want to say we've always respected Kendra. She's one of the hardest workers here. Kendra almost laughed at the sudden change in tone. A half hour ago, Megan had been whispering about trimming the fat. Now she was scrambling to rewrite history. Ethan's eyebrow lifted. Good to know. I'll be asking Kendra for her perspective on that. Megan's face paled. Tyler jumped in quickly, his words tumbling out. Absolutely, sir. She's invaluable. We've always said that. Kendra's lips pressed together, holding back the retort that burned on her tongue. She had never once heard Tyler call her invaluable. In fact, she could still hear the echo of his laughter from the morning, mocking her presentation. Linda chimed in, her tone saccharine. I've been mentoring Kendra personally, you know. Helping her adjust to the fast-paced environment here. She's really blossomed. Kendra's jaw tightened. Mentoring? If humiliation was mentorship, then perhaps Linda had a point. Ethan's eyes darkened, but his tone remained level. Funny. Because from where I stand, it looks like she's been succeeding in spite of certain obstacles. Linda's smile faltered. The room shifted again, tension thick enough to choke on. For years, this office had thrived on cruelty, mocking those who didn't fit their mold, rewarding those who laughed the loudest at someone else's expense. But now, the balance of power was shifting. And Kendra could feel it. Her coworkers weren't laughing anymore. They weren't mocking her skirt or her body or her work. They were staring at her with wide, wary eyes, as though suddenly realizing that the woman they dismissed was not just another employee. She was someone with power behind her. But more than that, she was someone who deserved respect in her own right. For the first time in a long time, Kendra straightened her shoulders. She lifted her chin, her eyes meeting theirs one by one. She didn't speak, not yet, but her silence spoke volumes. She wasn't going to shrink anymore. Ethan glanced at her, pride flickering in his gaze. Now, he said, turning back to the room, I'll give everyone the rest of the day to adjust to this news. Tomorrow, we begin fresh. And trust me, things will be very different. With that, he guided Kendra toward the elevator. The crowd parted like water, silent and shaken. As the doors closed behind them, Kendra exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Ethan, she whispered, her voice trembling. You didn't tell me. He looked down at her, his expression softening. I didn't want to until it was official. But Kendra, I've watched you carry so much on your own. Not anymore. Not here. Her throat tightened, but this time it wasn't from humiliation. It was from relief. From love. From the dawning realization that the days of suffering in silence were over. Still, she couldn't help but ask the question that had haunted her all morning. What if they resent me even more now? Ethan brushed a thumb gently across her hand. Then let them. Because they'll learn very quickly, if they can't respect you, they don't belong here at all. The elevator doors slid open, carrying them toward the next chapter, a chapter that would expose every mask, strip away every lie, and redefine what this office truly was. But for now, Kendra simply leaned into Ethan's strength, her spirit flickering back to life. For the first time in months, she felt something she thought she'd lost. Hope. Do you think Kendra should forgive her coworkers once they start pretending to respect her, or should she let Ethan clean house? Comment below with your thoughts. The next morning, the office buzzed with an anxious energy unlike anything Kendra had ever seen. Normally, the chatter was light, filled with gossip and laughter at someone else's expense. Today it was hushed, cautious, every word chosen carefully, as though the walls themselves might carry tales back to the new CEO. Kendra sat at her desk, sipping coffee. Her fingers tapped nervously on the keyboard, but her heart wasn't weighed down like yesterday. No mocking whispers floated through the air, no snide comments about her body. Her coworkers passed by quietly, offering tight smiles or avoiding her gaze altogether. It was strange. Liberating. Unsettling. At 9 a.m. sharp, the intercom crackled. Ethan's voice carried through the building, steady, commanding. Department heads, conference room. Now. The order was simple, but it vibrated with authority. Chairs scraped, footsteps shuffled, and within minutes, the key players had filed into the glass-walled conference room. Kendra followed, her chest tight with anticipation. She wasn't sure whether Ethan wanted her there, but when she hesitated at the door, his gaze found hers. He gave a slight nod, his eyes warm despite the steel in his expression. He wanted her beside him. She entered, and the murmurs of the room stilled. Richard, Linda, Megan, and Tyler sat rigidly in their chairs, each of them shifting nervously under Ethan's cool stare. Ethan stood at the head of the table, his posture crisp, his suit immaculate. Kendra sat quietly at his right hand, a seat of honor that didn't go unnoticed. "Let's begin," Ethan said. His voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the edge beneath it. "This company has potential. But potential is useless if the culture is rotten. So today, we're going to talk about that." Richard forced a chuckle. "Of course, sir. I think you'll find this is a high-performing team. We have a few personalities, sure, but nothing we can't handle." Ethan tilted his head, his gaze unblinking. "High-performing? Funny. Because in the last quarter, productivity dropped 14%. 3 major clients pulled out. And turnover is up 22%. Does that sound high-performing to you? Richard's smirk faltered. Well, there were circumstances. Circumstances you created, Ethan cut in smoothly. Micromanagement. Public humiliation of employees. Wasting talent because of your ego. That stops now. The room went still. Kendra's breath caught. She had lived under Richard's condescension for months, maybe years. Watching Ethan slice through him with nothing more than facts and steel-edged words felt like watching chains break in real time. Richard's face reddened. With respect, sir, Respect. Ethan's tone sharpened. You wouldn't know the meaning of the word if it was printed in bold on your desk. You've disrespected the people who work under you, including my wife. Gasps rippled through the table. Ethan let the words hang, heavy and deliberate. Richard stammered, I didn't know she was. Stop, Ethan said, his hand lifting slightly. Her value isn't tied to being my wife. She deserves respect because she's a professional who has delivered results despite you undermining her at every turn. The fact that you need me to tell you that is exactly why we're having this conversation. Richard shrank back, his shoulders slumping. For the first time, Kendra saw the great Richard Stanton look small. Ethan turned next to Linda. Linda Marshall, head of HR. The person meant to ensure fairness, safety, and support in this workplace. His tone was cool, clinical. Tell me, Linda, how many formal complaints of harassment crossed your desk in the last 6 months? Linda stiffened. Well, a few, but they weren't serious, just misunderstandings. Office banter, nothing harmful. Kendra's stomach twisted. She remembered the day she had walked past Linda's desk after another round of cruel comments, hoping, praying, for some kind of support. Linda had laughed and told her, grow thicker skin. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Not serious? Harassment is never banter. And brushing it off isn't support, it's negligence. You failed the very people you're supposed to protect. Linda's smile faltered. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his gaze piercing. Consider this your warning. Any further negligence, and you won't be head of HR. You won't be here at all. Kendra exhaled slowly, a weight lifting from her chest. Next, Ethan's attention shifted to Megan and Tyler. Megan. Tyler. Rising stars, I hear. The kind who know how to play politics. Laugh at the right jokes. Whisper in the right ears. Is that how you describe yourselves? Megan's face went pale. And no, sir. We've always worked hard. Ethan's voice cut clean through her excuse. Really? Because from what I've observed, your hard work seems to involve undermining teammates, mocking presentations, and making yourselves look good at someone else's expense. Tyler squirmed in his chair. That's not fair. Fair. Ethan's eyes sharpened. You think it's fair to laugh at someone in the middle of a presentation? To sneer at their work, then claim credit later? You think it's fair to tear down someone who was carrying this department on her back while you coasted? Neither of them spoke. Their silence was answer enough. Kendra's chest swelled, not with fear this time, but with pride. For so long, she had endured their cruelty in silence. Now, their masks were cracking under Ethan's relentless gaze. Ethan finally leaned back, his voice quiet but commanding. This is the new standard at Redmond & Company: respect, integrity, accountability. Those who can't live up to it won't last here. And make no mistake, I'll know the difference between change and pretense. His eyes swept across the table, pinning each of them in place. Richard's jaw was clenched, sweat beading at his temple. Linda's polished facade had slipped, her lips pressed into a thin line. Megan and Tyler sat stiff and pale, their usual smugness evaporated. Kendra sat silently beside Ethan, her spine straighter than ever before. For the first time, she didn't feel like a target. She felt like a witness, to justice, to accountability, to a reckoning long overdue. Ethan reached for her hand under the table, giving it a subtle squeeze. It was both a promise and a reminder, this is only the beginning. And Kendra knew it. Act 4 wasn't the end. It was the storm before the final thunderclap. The true reckoning was yet to come. If you were in Kendra's shoes, would you want Ethan to fire them immediately, or let them suffer under the pressure first? Comment your choice: instant justice or slow burn. The air in the conference room the following morning was thick enough to choke on. Word had spread across the office. The new CEO was calling an all-hands meeting. Every employee crowded into the largest space the building had, a floor-to-ceiling glass atrium with rows of chairs lined before a raised platform. Kendra sat quietly in the front row, her heart pounding. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, not mocking this time, but wary, even fearful. Some people avoided her gaze. Others watched her with curiosity, as if trying to read what role she would play in what was about to unfold. At precisely 10 a.m., Ethan stepped onto the platform. He didn't need to raise his voice. The room stilled instantly. "Good morning," he began, his tone measured. "I called this meeting for one reason: to make it clear what kind of company Redmond and Company will be moving forward. The old way, of gossip, cruelty, intimidation, is finished. A new culture begins today." Murmurs rippled through the room, but Ethan held up a hand, silencing them. "To show you what I mean, let's start with accountability." He pressed a button on a small remote, and the screen behind him flickered to life. A slideshow of anonymous employee feedback appeared, pulled from surveys, complaints, and HR files. The words were harsh, damning. "The boss humiliates people in meetings. If you don't fit their idea of perfect, they tear you down. I've never worked in a place so toxic." Gasps rippled through the crowd as line after line appeared. Kendra's chest tightened. She recognized some of those words, her own, typed into a complaint that had gone nowhere. Ethan's voice was steady. "These are not exaggerations. They are lived experiences of your colleagues. People who came here to build careers, not to be broken down." He clicked again. The screen changed, now showing performance metrics, graphs of declining productivity, turnover, and lost clients. This is what happens when a workplace is poisoned. Numbers don't lie. And neither do people. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat near the front. Sweat trickled down his temple. Ethan's gaze sharpened. "Richard Stanton. Stand up." The room froze. Richard hesitated, then pushed himself to his feet, his face red. Ethan's voice cut like a blade. "You were entrusted to lead. Instead, you belittled, you bullied, and you drove away talent this company desperately needed. You humiliated employees publicly, including my wife, who produced results despite you. Effective immediately, you're relieved of your position." The room erupted into gasps and whispers. Richard's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. His authority, once untouchable, crumbled in seconds. Two security guards stepped forward from the back, waiting. Richard's face hardened, but he knew he was beaten. He stormed out, his footsteps echoing like thunder. Ethan didn't pause. His gaze turned to Linda. "Linda Marshall. HR is supposed to protect employees, not dismiss their pain as banter. You failed. And when employees cried for help, you silenced them. That ends today. You're terminated." Linda's jaw dropped. "You can't." Ethan cut her off with a look. "I just did." The guards moved again. Linda's face crumpled, her polished facade shattering as she was escorted out. Megan and Tyler sat stiff as statues, pale as paper. Ethan turned his attention to them. "Megan. Tyler. You've built reputations on politics and cruelty. Mocking, whispering, tearing others down to climb higher. That stops now. I believe in second chances, but only if they're earned. You will remain here under strict probation. Any sign of the same behavior, and you're gone. Consider this your final warning." Megan nodded frantically, her eyes wide. Tyler swallowed hard, his smugness completely gone. Ethan let the silence hang before continuing. "Now, I want everyone to understand something. This isn't just about punishment. It's about change. Respect will no longer be optional, it will be the foundation. If you can't build on that, you don't belong here." The room was silent, all eyes on him. Then, to Kendra's surprise, Ethan turned toward her. "Kendra," he said, his voice softer now. "You've endured more than anyone should have to. Would you like to say something?" Her heart stopped. For a moment she froze, the weight of 100 gazes pressing down on her. But then she felt Ethan's eyes, steady, supportive, and something inside her shifted. She rose slowly, her legs trembling, but her voice, when it came, was clear. "I came here because I believed in my work," she began. "But somewhere along the way, I started believing the lies, that I wasn't enough, that I didn't belong. And I let that silence me." She paused, scanning the room. The same people who had laughed at her now sat stone-faced, guilty, ashamed. Her voice grew stronger. "But I do belong. And so does every person who shows up here ready to give their best. We don't need perfection. We need respect. We need dignity. We need to lift each other up instead of tearing each other down." The silence was heavy, but this time, it wasn't cruel. It was reverent. Listening. Kendra drew a breath. "So if you're willing to change, really change, I'll stand with you. But if you keep choosing cruelty, you'll stand alone." Her words hung in the air, echoing like a promise. Then, slowly, someone in the back began to clap. Another joined. Then another. Within moments, the room erupted in applause, not forced, not performative, but genuine. Kendra's eyes filled with tears. For the first time, the applause wasn't at her expense. It was for her. Ethan placed a hand over hers, his pride unmistakable. "This," he said firmly, "is the new Redmond and Company. A place where voices like Kendra's lead the way." And with that, the old order was gone. The bullies were silenced. The culture was reborn. Kendra stood taller, her spirit no longer weighed down. She wasn't just Ethan's wife. She wasn't just a survivor of cruelty. She was a woman who had reclaimed her power, and this time, no one would take it from her. Weeks later, the office felt unrecognizable. Meetings were collaborative, not cruel. Ideas flowed freely. Kendra led her own projects with confidence, and coworkers who once mocked her now sought her input sincerely. At home, Ethan often teased her, saying, "See? Told you they'd learn." And Kendra would smile, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Because she had learned something too, something stronger than any insult, louder than any laughter. She had learned that her worth had never been up for debate. And now, the whole world knew it. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories. And tell me in the comments, what part hit you the hardest? Kendra's humiliation, Ethan's reveal, or her final speech?